Well, hello and welcome to another episode of A Photographic Life, and the second in our series of revisits to the photographers who contributed answering the question, what does photography mean to you, to them, perhaps also through listening to you, to me, to you. I think there was a strange comedy act about that. But anyway, let's move on, shall we, and listen to this week's contributions.
To me, photography is posterity, history documented one moment at a time. When I embark on a portrait session, I remind myself, and often relay to my subjects, that the photographs we are about to make aren't as much about right now as they are about 20, 30, or 50 years from now. In that way, all photography is documentary. Obviously, wedding photography, sports photography, and photojournalism are documentary. But I would make the case that music, fashion, and street photography are also documentary. And by extension, portraiture is documentary. This past week, comedian Norm Macdonald passed away after a years-long struggle with cancer. I had forgotten that I had photographed Norm for Us magazine 23 years ago in 1998 until I was reminded by a friend of mine who had assisted me on that shoot. Once I'd found the proof sheets in my archive, I was struck by a number of things, not the least of which was how the business and workflows of editorial portraiture have changed over the years. But more importantly, I realized that I had photographed Norm at the height of his fame, after he had been fired from Saturday Night Live. My portraits were a part of Norm's story, and they were now a part of the historical record of a great American comedian. I believe that we remember our history and society's history mostly in terms of still photos, and only occasionally in terms of video. A still image becomes part of a catalog of personal and collective memories, at least for those of us raised in the 20th century. But the question for the 21st century is, will the power of the still image be diminished by the ubiquity of photography that is created every single day on our cell phones, roughly estimated at 39 million images per day? Perhaps we should now be framing photography more in terms of currency than in terms of history.
Story 1. My sister. In my mum and dad's photo album, there's a square photo with a centimetre white border. It's an image of my sister fast asleep. She must be about 8 years old, which would make me about 4 when the photo was taken. The eider-down is gold and the pillow is pink. Her right arm is bent up around her head, and her dark, short black hair is messy, and her face is beautiful. When I saw this photo of my sister, I was so jealous, I insisted my dad take a photo of me asleep. But to my knowledge, he never complied. Story 2. Photography. When I was in 4th year primary school, Mrs. Rimmer wrote the word photography on the blackboard, and she asked us to put our hands up to read out what it said to the class. In my head, I read it as photography. Annette Lawford put her hand up and said photography. I was amazed at this epiphany. I remember thinking what an interesting word it was, and how clever Annette Lawford was. Story 3. Lisa's bedroom. We must have been around 13 or 14, and I used to spend a lot of time at my friend Lisa's house. She was and still is one of my best friends. Plus, she had a TV, a phone, a sink, a sofa bed, and a constantly replenished biscuit barrel in her bedroom. Lisa's parents had a lodger whose job was to travel the country and photograph the product displays of a popular fizzy drink. He used a Polaroid camera and had a stash of Polaroid film in the small box bedroom he rented. Lisa and I used to liberate boxes of the film, and like many young girls, we used it to photograph ourselves. We had limited wardrobe, but nevertheless, we scraped costumes together. It's curious to see what our choice of characters were: an old woman, a builder, a student, an expected mother, and bit actors from the film Grease. Polaroid, even then, was relatively expensive. But we used it with gay abandon, as we felt extremely confident in our stealth-like ability to acquire more. During our visits to the box bedroom, we became aware that the lodger also kept a large quantity of pornographic magazines, which we studied with great interest. In retrospect, this entire episode may well have been a seminal moment in my introduction to photography and its varied uses. The lodger never mentioned his ever-diminishing pile of Polaroid film, nor made any efforts to move his Scandinavian fetish porn collection. I recall us feeling disappointed when he finally left his job and vacated Lisa's parents' box bedroom. Story 4. Corin Day. My secondary school was on the outskirts of Croydon. I didn't enjoy school in the least. Our school jumpers were a vibrant green, such an odd colour for a school uniform. At a particular low point, I had to see the deputy head, where I explained my concerns. She told me how, when she was on public transport, she would look at people and write down their descriptions and her thoughts about them. She suggested I did the same too whilst I was at school. At the time, I appreciated her off-script response, but I appreciate it even more so now. Funnily enough, the model Kate Moss was in the year below me. I remember her bringing her first fashion shoots for a teen magazine into the canteen at school. Quite soon after, she started working with Corin Day for The Face, resulting in these infamous fashion spreads. The images they made, had a profound effect on me. I was both intrigued and anxious, and from that moment I started buying The Face and would hold my breath whilst looking through the magazine. Rolling on a decade and a bit, I was on the same talk series at Maidstone University with Corin Day, and there was a bizarre circular feeling to this. In no way would I have imagined I would be so close to someone that felt so far away. I wanted to tell her my story, but while sitting next to her it didn't feel right. She was in her own world, and I didn't want to disrupt it. Story 5. Gordon. In a non-linear process, I ended up attending the editorial photography degree course at Brighton University in 1992. On the first day, we were entered into the Salisbury Lecture Theatre and were shown the film The Rebel with Tony Hancock. It was such a clever film to show a group of aspiring artists, and since I've watched it a million times, and I've drummed it into my daughters also. I had a packet of soft mints, and I turned to my neighbour and offered him one. I much later found out that person sitting next to me had to go to an emergency dentist, as the mint had dislodged his tooth. I also found out he was on my photography degree course. This person now has been my husband for 25 years. Photography has punctuated my life in so many ways, like many people's, I assume. However, unlike the Annette Lawford days, I am less enamoured by the word. It even makes me cringe at times. But maybe when you have lived with something for so long, it's only reasonable to feel a push and pull, a love and a hate. These stories have little relevance to the work I make as an artist, yet they are a series of stories that through chance and happenstance have perhaps brought me to where I am now.
Photography means love to me. That's the only time that I take photographs, is when I see something I love and something that I want to share with people. So even in the beginning of my photographic career, so to speak, when I was photographing peace demonstrations, I loved the fact that people were out there demonstrating against the war. And it was the same with music for me. When I began taking pictures of musicians in New York City, I could only take photographs of the musicians if I liked the music they were playing. If I didn't like it, I couldn't take it. The experience of photography, the experience of photographing, is very deeply connected to how I feel. So if I feel uptight about listening to certain music, I have no interest in taking pictures. The other day I read something, it was either a movie or a play about art, and it said, great art only comes from pain. When people experience pain, then they produce great art. And I thought, that's complete nonsense. I mean, I hope that's not true, but it's certainly not true for me. For me, the only time I take photographs, the only time I try and share photographs, is when I'm feeling good. And if I'm not feeling good about something, if I'm not enthralled with the subject, then I just don't do it. So I hope I'm not the only one in the world that acts like this. And what else does it mean to me? Let's see. It means a way of communicating what I think is good in life to hopefully, one, inspire people to look at the same things I look at, let's say, that I find beautiful, and to pay attention to them and to honor them. It means something that's fun, actually. I really love to take photographs, and I only take them when I'm feeling really good and really free. I don't take them because I have to. I think when I first started photographing, I would take them without being sensitive to how I'm feeling. What I'm referring to here is that I don't take photographs when I'm home in Woodstock, because when I'm home, I've got the burden of my archives, all the pictures I've taken for the last 50-something years, and films and writings, and it's all very, very meaningful to me. I love it all, and I'm very attached to it in terms of wanting it to go out there in the right way, in a pure way, so it expresses the things I'm thinking or what I was feeling. Certainly when I take pictures, I hope it shows how I'm thinking, the feeling I have. I look at the different bodies of my work, like I have kaleidoscopic images, and I have pixelated images, and I have impressionist flowers. It's everything that is out of the normal mind, at least in the latter years it's like that, as well as photographs of my wife that I've taken many of. And we made this into a book called Love at 60, which is not published yet. But this shows I'm also out of my mind. I'm out of my mind in love. When you are in your mind, you're thinking about things, and the goal of meditation is to be out of your mind. So I think photography for me is also a way to help people get out of their mind, meaning out of their thinking mind, and just feel into their feeling senses. And it's a tool, but I don't use it as a tool. It just happens to be a tool. In its secondary function for me, it's a tool. But primarily, it makes me feel good when I take pictures. I really enjoy it. And I'm only interested in pictures that I'm not really sure what they're going to look like after I get them. At least these days it's like that. So for me, it's fun. I take a picture and then I hope it's good, and I'm thrilled to look at it. And it's really enjoyment. And I was surprised, actually, that I still enjoy taking pictures now as much as I did when I first began. I only don't enjoy pictures when there's a reason for taking them other than wanting to take a picture. So if it's a project or an assignment or a favor for someone, the pleasure isn't there. But if it's taken because I love that image I'm seeing and I want to try and do something with it, enhance it, experience it, and I'm so thrilled when I see good pictures. It's really fun to do that. Photography means a way of being. It's both a way of myself feeling and also a way of being connected to other people by sharing it with them. So that's what photography means to me. It means a lot.
What photography means to me? Photography means to me love, connection, understanding. Photography, since I discovered it when I was 15, was my way to connect to the world around me, to see more in the world around me, to understand and feel more, to love more, to be together. Photography to me comes from love, comes from pain, comes from compassion. Photography is also a way to tell stories, to tell them to other people, to have other people open up to me and tell me their stories. So it's a way, I guess, to trade stories. For me, it's a way to show my flaws, tell other people how much there is there in our lives, how much love and connection, how much pain, but how we're all very specifically different, but in a way very much alike. So photography is a way to connect to the people I'm most close to and I love most, but it's also a way to connect to strangers. Photography for me is a way to feel the world, to connect to the world, to understand the world around me, and to see more in it. I love photography. And if I forget to see, if I forget to understand, if I forget to feel, I know I have to pick up the camera. And it will be photography that will make me do all those things again.
To me, photography means really very, very much. Already since the first year and the first time I hold the camera in my hand, I feel very much part of photography. I can manage life because of photography. In 1978, when the teacher of photography on the School of Journalism, where I was studying to become a writing journalist, saw me being very unhappy wandering through the school, called me to him and said, "Here is a camera, and I think it's better for you to start to learn photography than to start to learn writing." And from the first second on, when I hold the Nikon FM2 in my hand, I felt like coming home. The cold feeling of the metal, and especially the fact that I could frame reality and crop it so I could handle the reality and the real world better than looking beside the camera. It became a love relationship between me and the medium of photography. Also, when I started to learn to print and being in the darkroom and getting results that grew better and better because I practiced a lot and I could see how beautifully the skin tones translated into black and white, my love was growing more and more. But there was one thing I really didn't like about reality, and that was the reality itself. So when I saw the works of people like Robert Mapplethorpe and Joe Peter Witkin, but also Helmut Newton and Guy Boudin, and George Pratt Lyons, Richard Avedon, Horsby Horst, they were all examples to me that a translation of reality into your own imagination was far more appealing towards me. So that made me decide to start my own studio. And since 1983, I feel incredibly comfortable with the fact that I can create my own worlds with my own language and my camera in my studios. So up till today, you know, I feel like a very blessed person that is so happy that already early in my life, photography crossed my path. And I hope I will continue photographing till I drop dead.
My name is Mark Neville. I'm an artist working with photography. I'm currently sat in my studio in East London. Photography means and has meant different things to me at different periods of my life. So when I was a young boy, my grandfather, who I was surrounded by frequently during my youth, used to be captain of a ship during World War II, and when he came back, clearly, I see now, suffering from PTSD, he just used to shout at everyone in the family and take photographs of us using this box camera. And I became powerfully aware at a very young age that this camera was a means of communication for him. It was a way for him to mediate a relationship between himself and the world, because he couldn't do it by conventional means anymore. So that was my first kind of introduction to what photography could mean for someone. And the next big experience with photography was when I was working as a fashion model. So that was in my 20s, and there I became powerfully aware of how photography maybe isn't so enabling, how it reduces people to reduces flesh and blood really to two-dimensional dimensions, planes, experiences, and commodifies skin, commodifies real people in some way. So later, when I started using photography as my, if you like, the primary medium for my work, although I think the primary medium is more to do with ideas rather than a medium per se. When I started using photography as the main medium, if you like, in my work, then that would have been in my mid-30s, at the age of 35, when I made a book project which I gave out to every single resident in the every single home rather in a town on the west coast of Scotland called Port Glasgow. And it was a way for me of subverting the way in which coffee table books always ended up on the coffee tables of white English middle-class people like me, and not on the coffee tables of the people represented in those books. It was a kind of subversion of the social documentary genre in a way. So for me, photography has been about these contradictory forces of positive and negative. Positive being, means of communication, a means of expressing a viewpoint in the world, a kind of existential expression about enabling someone to have a voice, enabling someone to express an opinion, and on the other hand, reducing someone, commodifying them in a way which is inaccurate or incomplete. And also the element of voyeurism, which is at once, can be at once appealing, but also abusive or exploitative. So it's always, for me, about negotiating those two opposites and trying to find a way to swing the balance towards the ethical in some way. And that's always a tightrope with social documentary work, and that's a pitfall, but that's also the challenge of it.
You heard there from photographers in order: Art Streiber, Clare Strand, Elliott Landy, Elinor Carucci, Erwin Olaf, and Mark Neville. Once again, I think you will agree, lots of food for thought there in those contributions. As last week I marked the passing of Paul Lowe and also photographer Brian Griffin, who had contributed to our podcast. This week I have to mention the passing also of Erwin Olaf, and great sadness there in that we've lost him from the world of photography. Anyway, as I say, lots to think about, lots to consider, and of course, please, over the coming week, take care.